Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we are going to be going over probably one of the most awesome reveals that I've seen in a while. But not because I'm a particular fan of the Tau, but because of the implications that the reveals today had. And of course, what I'm talking about is Games Workshop finally taking steps, taking some action to fix Warhammer 40K 10th Edition's biggest problem. And everybody out there watching the video is going to automatically know what I'm talking about, right? Of course, I'm talking about war gear, free war gear, power level, basically by another name. The absolute worst implementation from 9th edition to 10th edition that essentially invalidated tons of different weapon options from many different armies. And today, for the first time in a long time, I dared to dream. I dared to hope. And a slow moving tear crawled down my face because, guys, this has big implications not only for 10th edition, but for the Eldar themselves. So yes, even though this looks like a Tau video based on the thumbnail and based on the title of the video and so forth, it is actually not a Tau video. This is an Eldar video. This is a 40K video for 10th edition. And the direction that I hope GW continues when we get our new codexes going forward. All right, so let us go ahead and dive right into it and talk about what we're going to be looking at in today's video. So the first thing we're going to be defining is the biggest problem with Warhammer 40K 10th edition, talking about what it is and, of course, why it's horrible for the game. We're then going to go ahead and dive into the new Tau Crisis Battlesuit reveal and how that reveal fixes this issue, and hopefully, if this trend continues, will fix Warhammer 40K itself. Or at least the biggest issue in it currently. And lastly, we're going to be talking about what it means going forward for the game itself, and more specifically, the Aeldari. Because this is an Aeldari channel, and I promote Aeldari supremacy, so every video has to, of course, tie back to the Eldar. Okay, so what's the biggest problem with Warhammer 40K 10th edition? In general, I've liked 10th edition. I thought it was refreshing. I thought a lot of the ideas were good. I thought simplifying the game in general made it better. But it did have some issues. Let's be real, guys. 10th edition had a rocky start, and some of the concepts that we saw didn't quite pan out. And of course, free war gear was one of them, because free war gear is just power level by another name. Nobody likes power level. Why? Because it invalidates a lot of different options for your units. You're never going to pick the flamer when you can pick the plasma gun. You're never going to pick up the scatter laser when you can easily pick up a bright lance for the same cost. And when your units are priced towards the most expensive options, you're gonna take the most expensive options. And that's really just it, right? And if you look at any competitive list, they're basically all doing the same thing, because that's kind of where we're at now. When you have free war gear, people are going to pick whatever has the most value as far as the points it can destroy. And for your anti-infantry killing power, which you probably will need in your list, you're going to be relying on other units to do it. Your battle line units or your other troop options that just don't really have, the option to take anti-large weaponry. So while this has on one hand simplified the games in terms of points, it has essentially also made many builds obsolete, which sucks, right? Again, choice is important, but you also have to make sure that those choices are equally balanced. Were they ever equally balanced? In reality, no. Of course not, right? There was always a strongest build for the points, but that's not really the issue, right? And when GW made everything free, instead of actually giving real choices, it eliminated them completely. Because at least before with the cheaper weapon options, there was a reason to take the cheaper options, right? There was a purpose to it. If you wanted a Viper with a scatter laser, there was a point to it, because maybe you didn't care if your Viper did damage, you just wanted it to score secondary objectives, or annoy the enemy, or ram into another enemy tank. And you didn't feel like paying the extra points for a bright lens. So there was a purpose to it. Was the scatter laser ever realistically better than a bright lance on the Viper? Absolutely not. But because it was cheaper, it served a different purpose and therefore had value. And that's pretty much what it was across the entire board in 40K. Pretty much every player who played 40K was, at least to some degree complaining about this change. And the most support that I actually saw this get was people simply just saying, well, I don't really have that much of an issue with it. But they also weren't saying they liked it. So that means it was really unpopular. And of course, it is to this day one of the worst changes in 10th edition. Everyone basically hates it, and if they don't hate it, they tolerate it, just like the people in the movie theater who clap after every single movie trailer that they watch. I think we can all agree those people are pretty annoying, just like free war gear. But what I had hoped is that this would lead to divergent datasheets to offset this. So instead of having all of the options on one datasheet under one set of rules for one unit, you had different datasheets, maybe using the same box or the same models, but armed with different things, specialized in different ways. So maybe a unit with flamers would have a different special rule than a unit with grenade launchers. Or, if you were playing Eldar, you'd have different rules for a Viper with a Bright Lance versus a Viper with a Scatter Laser. Because those weapons do very different things, it would make sense that the Viper crew itself would also be specialized towards that objective. If they had a Bright Lance, for example, they'd be expert anti-large hunters, right? They'd be able to hunt enemy vehicles and monsters. But if they had a Scatter Laser, maybe they were better at support, tagging targets and revealing enemies that, might be hiding in cover. So basically, that would fix a lot of the issues that GW also has with the lack of data sheets in certain armies. Certain armies just don't have a lot of data sheets, but in this way, you could artificially create more rules for the same units and produce enjoyment in different ways for people who, own those models. But so far, GW hasn't really done that a lot. A lot of the new codexes we've seen haven't had a lot of divergent datasheets like this. Or at least we haven't had a lot of armies where divergent datasheets would be, a key thing to include. Come in the Tau. And I didn't expect this. I was kind of resigned to the fact that GW might take the lazy way out on this and not create new datasheets for different units. But I'm happy to say that I was actually wrong. And today, when GW had their big reveal for what they were going to do with Tau battlesuits, I was head over heels about it. Not because, again, I'm a big Tau fan or anything like that. I did dabble in Tau a little bit back in 4th edition, and anybody who played Tau back in 4th edition probably can attest. They were pretty awful back then. And truthfully, on a personal level, I've just always loved Eldar way more than Tau, so I ended up not sticking with that army. But they are pretty cool as far as Xenos go, and I really do like the mech kind of aesthetic, the anime aesthetic that they have. Kind of like an Evangelion kind of thing, which is really cool. But the surprise reveal today was that they're actually going to be breaking up Tau Crisis battlesuits into 3 different distinct datasheets. So basically, instead of just having a bunch of useless options that only give the illusion of choice, you're actually having 3 distinct datasheets for the crisis suits that will have a different specialization based on their former weapon loadouts, which actually give them roles to play in the battle. And of course, gives you different considerations for list building, so you don't have to just spam the same weapon option over and over and over again if you want to stay competitive with your Tau battlesuits. You can actually pick different loadouts that have meaning, that have meaningful implications in the game. So this way, it's also great for balance because you can actually balance battlesuits in a legitimate way. You don't have to balance them to their greatest weapon option. You can adjust the points accordingly without, again, destroying the balance of the unit with each different point increase or rule change. And if one datasheet is a little bit underpowered, you can just fix that datasheet and that won't affect the other datasheets that might be a lot stronger. So there's essentially 3 different datasheets that came out of this. There is, of course, the Sunforge loadout, which devastates large targets with fusion blasters. This was very popular back in the day, especially, in the earlier editions of Warhammer 40K, but has kind of fallen by the wayside again to the cyclic ion blaster spam that people are running in competitive play nowadays. Because mathematically speaking, it's pretty much the best option for any hard target. You have the Fire Knife loadout, which destroys mech targets with plasma rifles and missile pods. I'm sure you'll be able to choose which one you want, either a plasma rifle or a missile pod with them. And lastly, you have the Star Scythe loadout, which wipes out guard equivalent enemies and light infantry. So, with burst cannons and flamers. And again, this was a loadout that was never used. In fact, I rarely even saw those weapons in 9th edition when they were cheaper. So it's going to be good to probably, most likely, see some of these data sheets and some of these weapons in action again. The Sunforge is probably going to cost the most, being an anti-large platform, followed by the Fire Knife, and with the Star Scythe being the cheapest and probably the best as an objective score unit, or a unit that's going to go after enemy objective scorers. So against the Eldar, that would mean things like Swooping Hawks and Rangers, right? Which, you do need stuff in your army to deal with those units as well. So that's really cool. And that gives you a lot of different considerations for what units to pick. So what does this mean going forward for the game, and more specifically the Aeldari? Well, while it's not guaranteed, and of course I'm not, prophesizing that this is going to happen with every army, because who knows how GW operates. They operate in the same kind of ways that Tzeentch operates. We never really know what they're going to do. But I think it is a clear indication of how GW plans to balance different multiple loadouts going forward. And I really do think that the way GW sees this is, we can create new data sheets out of existing box sets. We can sell more box sets because people are going to want to be trying these new options. Of course, you can magnetize and stuff like that. But, if you don't want to do that and you want to try different stuff in the same game, then it's a win-win, right? Players get the rules that they want, they get to use the weapons that they want to, and we get to make money selling more toys. And I'm all for this. As somebody who is a plastic connoisseur myself, I love buying models when I can. Obviously, I don't like some of the GW prices, but, if they're going to make new data sheets out of existing kits, I think that's awesome. And what it means for the Eldar Codex is that when it comes out, probably in 2025, probably the very beginning of 2025, I think we can expect different data sheets for different units. And I know this is a big conversation, not only in the Eldar community, but in other communities as well in 40K, because we want to be able to use different options, Like, for example, the Wraith Knight. We want to be able to use the Scatter Shield and the Titanica Ghostglaive. The reason why we really can't is because it sucks. And I know some people out there will say, oh, well, it doesn't matter if it sucks. It's still fun and all that. And that's true. Don't get me wrong. Units that suck can still be very fun. But why not both? Why can't we have units that are super cool and also have decent rules? I don't think that's too much to ask for the $150 I spent on that model, right? So I think there's obviously some room for that going forward. And if you're worried about the more OP loadouts, you could just increase the points of those, or you can change the rules accordingly so that they're less OP. And this way, if you have to nerf things like the Wraith Knight in the future, you can only focus on nerfing the OP aspects of that model, and you don't nerf the fun stuff, right? You don't nerf the Sword and Board, Scatter Shield, and Titanic Ghostglaive, or the Sun Cannon. And this would also give you more options in list building. And I think it's only a good thing to have this for every single army. Think about support weapons. Oh my gosh, the amount of times and the amount of shit I've given to vibro cannons, right? Oh my God, vibro cannons are awful. You would never take these even in the worst kind of circumstances. Like, even if you had accidentally glued a vibro cannon on your support weapon and couldn't get it off for whatever reason, you would still just proxy it as something else. You would say it's a D cannon and just hope your opponent didn't notice, right? That's not a good feeling. That's not a good feeling when you really like the lore of a weapon, but it's absolute trash in the game and will never actually kill anything. So having 3 different data sheets could allow GW to buff things like the Vibro Cannon or the Shadow Weaver, and at the same time, leave the D Cannon as is or nerf accordingly because it's the strongest option. And I think that's a really good thing, not only for game balance, but for player enjoyment. And perhaps more. Right? There's a lot of other units in the Eldar Index that could use this, Vipers, Warwalkers, Wraith Lords even, could have different data sheets with different weapon combinations, and they could specialize in different things on the battlefield. This could be the beginning of something really cool and really exciting for 10th edition. And I, for one, am really excited to see not only what they do with the Tau going forward, but other codexes as well, because if we see this trend continue, we're almost guaranteed to see multiple datasheets for every single army that comes out, at least for certain units, right? I know that there's some units out there that don't really need it, like, Guardian Defenders, for example. I don't think that they need a different datasheet for each heavy weapon they take. But of course, for other armies, this would also be really cool as well. Like, for example, Imperial Guard having different abilities for different heavy weapon units. For example, heavy bolters and autocannons could have an anti-infantry specialty, while las cannons and missile launchers could have an anti-large specialty. And of course, if you had a unit of mortars, they could have their own special ability that helps them perform their intended role. So in conclusion, I think GW has finally started to take the steps needed to balance loadouts for units with multiple weapon options. They're actually taking steps to, improve their game. They're finally listening to the community and the issues we have with certain aspects of the rules. Gone are the days where GW can hide behind the old phrase, we're a miniatures company first and foremost. And I, for one, love the changes to Crisis Battlesuits, and while it does invalidate some weapon combos, let's be honest here, absolutely no one was taking anything other than cyclic ion blasters in competitive play. And if you're out there and you were running flamers and burst cannons, Isha bless you, bless your heart. But there's good news for you guys too, because they're going to have a Legends datasheet with all the old weapon options on it. So if you still want to take your cyclic ion blasters, or you still want to take your flamer and fusion gun combo, you still can. So there's really no loss there either. And if you still want to be, the player that mixes and matches their different weapon options and stuff like that, you can still do that to a large degree. If you have your weapons magnetized, you can still swap them. They're just going to be a different data sheet. And yeah, you won't be able to take things like a fusion blaster and a flamer together, but, ask yourselves, was that ever a good combination anyway? Did that ever make sense as a combination? Probably not. I know it's cool, but again, if you're just going for cool, if you're just going for that, then they still have that Legends datasheet available. And I really do believe that this is just going to be a net game, not only for Tau players, but for every single army going forward, because now we can finally have some hope that our different weapon options will actually be usable. Vibro Cannon meta incoming, everybody. Get down to your local pharmacy, go to the family planning section, and pick up a few. They're buy one, get one free, guys. And just enjoy the look of shock on the cashier's face as you purchase those vibrator cannons. I promise you, I'm buying them for a friend. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today's video. Thanks for watching. Thank you so much to all my Patreons and supporters who have supported the channel over the last year. Your help has greatly improved the channel and helped it grow significantly. We're almost to 4K subscribers. That would be awesome if we could reach that by the end of this month, but we'll see. If you do want to help support the channel, I have free trials on my Patreon activated, which will grant you permanent access to our Discord community, which is a community of Eldar players and enthusiasts who love talking about strategy, tactics, and of course, hobbying. I will leave the link for that in the description below. I'm also an Amazon affiliate and have a channel store page, so if you want to grab some Eldar-inspired apparel on the channel store page, or grab some discounted Eldar miniatures on Amazon via the affiliate link, I will leave those in the description as well. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today's video. I will see you guys next time. We have some more Eldar content coming out later this week, as well as some old world content sprinkled in there, hopefully. So I will see you guys in the next video. Have a good one, everybody. Peace out.